You always sound so fresh first thing in the morning.
By the end,
She's like you guys. She's kind of wilted.
Exactly.
All right, I guess I'll wear it on people. We talked about the suggestions. So if you look on the bullet points, we're going to deal with that last one. The 5 problem areas of marriage. Now, if I were to ask you what you thought the 5 problem areas in marriage are, and I know that there are some subpoints, some particulars that we go through, but if we talk about 5 major problem areas, what would you say that they are? Money,
religion,
money, religion,
kids,
communication. You've just about got them all.
in-laws.
In-laws. You've hit them all, and not the order I teach them, but MIRCS is how I remember it. That has no, that Mercs it's spelled, but money, in-laws, religion, communication, sex, and children. All right? Those are the 5 problem areas.
Say it again.
Well, we're going to go through it, but I'm going to go through each of them in detail, but it's MIRCS, money, in-laws, religion, communication, sex, and children. Do you know which one drives people to marital counseling the most?
Money?
No.
Sex?
No.
Love?
90% of all counseling is communication related.
Oh.
Too much, not enough, wrong kind, those kinds of things. Now, as I begin with the problem areas of marriage, I always begin with the foundation of marriage. What is marriage about? The Bible gives us 3 major purposes for marriage. So I'll deal with these in some detail. I'll talk about the fact that God created marriage. Marriage is for 2 committed people. So I'll talk about those kinds of things. I'm just trying to get them understanding what marriage is all about from a biblical perspective. And then I'll talk about the 3 major purposes, which are companionship, Genesis 2, 18 to 25. Procreation, Genesis 1, 27 and 28. And to avoid fornication, 1 Corinthians 7, 1 and 2. So it's companionship, Genesis 2, 18 to 25. Procreation, Genesis 1, 27 and 28. And to avoid fornication, 1 Corinthians 7, 1 and 2. All right. Now, having dealt with that as a kind of a framework for the problem areas of marriage, these 5 problem areas are essentially where we get off track from what God designed our marriage to be. Now, they're all essential areas. You think about it. You can't live anywhere in this world, third world, industrialized, a first world nation, without money. In-laws are just biological necessity, good, bad, or ugly. Religion, well, even if you're an atheist, that's still a religion. So religion plays a part in every marriage. Communication, because God made us vocal, communicative creatures, it's going to happen. Sex, natural, children, biological inevitability in most cases, at least something that's desired in most cases. You're going to be dealing with areas that are essential, but we get off track in them. So we start with money. Don't know if this will surprise you or not, but by my count, 1 out of every 25 verses in the Bible is about money. More said about money than baptism.
That's the whole Bible or just the New Testament?
The whole Bible. And of course, you think about the Decalogue of Moses and the Torah and how much is said about grain offering and fruit offering and sin offering, votive offering. So you have all those would be passages that are counted, first fruit passages, what the books of poetry say about it. So it's not surprising.
That more about money.
Than baptism?
Than baptism.
Well, there's a whole long list of things, I guess. If you begin to think about it, there's more said about money than the church. There's more said about money. I can't remember my list. There's probably 20, 25 things I've preached on in preaching on giving and how much is said about money as opposed to other things. Pretty sure more said about money than adultery. And that's a great. I had to do this. I did a lesson in a DVD series on the truth about, that WBBS put out, and I preached on giving. And something I always try to emphasize, this is just an aside, is, and we need to preach this, that giving is not about budgets. Giving is not about the financial need of the church. Giving is a spiritual matter. It's a litmus test of our faith, of our trust, and our relationship to money. But that's certainly true in marriage as well. Usually it's an abusive concept of money that leads to troubles in marriage. All right, some questions about money. And you take as much time with this as you feel is warranted. A good study in this is, if you want to write it down, is 1 Timothy chapter 6, some misconceptions about money. And I'll just give you a few to wet your whistle on this. Misconception number one is that money is the root of all evil, right? Isn't that a misconception? The love of money. That's right. And I'll do that. I'll do a true and false for them. I'll say true or false. Money is the root of all evil. Over half the time we go, oh, yep, true. No, money's a neutral thing. It's our relationship to money that makes the difference. Another from 1 Timothy 6 says that you can take it with you. And you've heard the old adage, right? Because he said we brought nothing into this world, it certainly will carry nothing out. Money buys happiness. What does Paul say? Having food and clothing. With this, be content.
Just wrote about that.
All right, some questions about money. So you can fully develop that. Just go to 1 Timothy 6. It's all there in the text. I've given you 3 of them. Some questions about money. Will we have a budget? Encourage them. Talk about the importance of a budget, a family budget. And that questionnaire that I gave you, I get them separately to fill this out. And in that questionnaire, I get them, especially if they're younger, to try to estimate how much things are going to cost. And I'm looking for 2 things. Number one, if they have a firm grip of reality of what things actually cost in the world. And number 2, I want to compare those 2. Because the woman may say for groceries for the month, it takes $500. And the man may say $125. Well, first of all, I want to recommend that she be the one that takes care of the finances. Well, they're going to be hungry after about the 7th or 8th of the month. All right, we have a budget. Who will manage the money? I always recommend that there at least be some intermittent sharing of the task. I know what Michael said when he did the finances here in class. It's actually opposite in our house. I handle the finances, but I have tried to get Kathy to do it periodically, pay the bills, to look into and manage our finances, at least to help. Why do I do that? Statistically speaking, I'm going to die before her. All right? I don't want her to be scratching her head not knowing how to deal with financial matters if she's never done that before. Now, the same is true for you. And it's tragic to even think about it, but sometimes women, ladies die first or something happens. And if you've never handled the financial end of things, you put yourself at a disadvantage. But typically in every marriage, somebody is going to be more proficient, and they're going to be the one that it kind of falls to. But oftentimes they've not even thought about that. Talk about insurance. What about insurance? With certain legislation that's being passed right now, health insurance may be a moot point, but heretofore it's been a decision that you've had to make. And a lot of folks have been uninsured. Beyond that, what about life insurance? What kind of, and I'm not an advisor, so I'm not going to tell them whole life, is a terrible option, that you need to have term insurance. Now, if they were to ask me, I do have experience with that. I'd say that term typically is a better option, but that's not what I'm there for. I'm there to say, you need to consider these things as you make your budget. Talk about stewardship. It's a major New Testament concept. And Christ and His church cannot be forgotten. All right, so that's what I would say about money. Depends on the couple. Sometimes that takes one whole session. You guys were asking me, typically, how many sessions should you budget? Now, and I look at this in terms of time. I want, typically speaking, 2 months or more, preferably 3 months or more, between the time that we start the counseling and the time that we're going to do the wedding. Well, and there's in this world that's logical. It depends on whether you're urban or rural. If you're rural, it's a little easier to get them in. But if it's in an urban setting, they both have a job, coordinating their schedule and your schedule so that you can get them in the office once a week is not as easy as it sounds. And so you need to be able to budget in either your inability to meet 1 week or their inability to meet from week to week. I also have a policy that helps, I think, for the couple to take the counseling more seriously, and especially is that effective if they're coming from across town or they're coming some distance and it's some sacrifice for them. I give them homework every time. And what I tell them, especially if they're younger, I'm not trying to be prejudiced against the young, but it's really important because there's a maturity factor there. If they don't do the homework, I apologize to them. I tell them up front, if you don't have your homework done, we don't meet that session. Now, that sounds harsh, but I've never had to cancel a session because I've been up front about that. And I say, listen, we got to have our homework done when we come. And they come in. I don't berate them. I don't belabor the point, but I just do tell them that up front. And that helps me to know that they're investing time outside of the counseling. So, I would say 6, 7, maybe even 8 sessions may be necessary, depending on how fast you move, on how much they talk, how much you think they need. If you're doing a Bible study as a part of this, that's going to take quite a bit of time. All right. Second problem area. Oh, at any point, guys, slow me down. Tell me I'm going too fast or questions.
I think you mentioned a couple of misconceptions. It's the root of all. It's the root of all.
It's the root of all evil.
Root of all evil, and you can take it with you. Was there another one?
Money buys happiness was the third one I mentioned. I'll give you a fourth one. Leading the Christian life leads to wealth. Now, and I do talk about the fact that you can avoid some financial pitfalls by following Christian principles, and that stewardship is going to help you to be a wise spender. But some of the best people I know, I tell you, in Tanzania, I knew a man, godly man. His neighbor's children died of AIDS, and he took those children in. The parents died of AIDS. He took the children in. He had 10 children, his and hers. He worked in the Tanzanite mine 6 days a week, and he had Sunday off. And he went to church all day on Sunday, and then went back to the mine, and he made $2 a day.
Wow.
Tell me this fellow's not godly. I mean, I knew him in his character. All I knew of him was he was a righteous man. Leading the Christian life hadn't let him be wealthy by earthly standards. So those are some of the misconceptions. Now, all that comes out of 1 Timothy chapter 6.
You've mentioned several times about how you can incorporate a Bible study into this, or doing these counseling sessions with non-Christians. Mm-hmm. How exactly would you attach a Bible study to something like this, or are you going to go through that?
Well, that's my third problem area. I kind of stick it in the middle so they don't feel targeted. I want to be very careful. And I also, in conducting the study, up front, I say it's not a prerequisite for me to counsel you or for me to marry you. Now, why do I do that? They're going to get married somewhere. And I want the door open. And history has demonstrated that I'm going to be successful. If they're coming to me, they consider me somebody of influence in their lives. Either her or him or whoever it is, either the Christian, non-Christian, or if they're both non-Christians, there's a reason they're coming to me. Mm-hmm. And so I may not get it done before they get married. And I don't want, particularly if I've only done one Christian, non-Christian wedding in my entire, that's a story for a whole other time. Yeah. I maybe, if I have time, I can talk about it. But that's the same rationale. And that's still an open story. I don't know how that was going to end. He's not a Christian yet. But I want to keep the door open. And I have an opportunity to influence them. And so I will say now, I want you to know I would really appreciate if because I kind of have, I don't charge for the counseling, kind of have them somewhat indebted, so I want to be very careful with that. Let's say something to the effect of, now, I hope you won't mind if maybe we spend a little time talking about how to make religion the place it ought to have in your marriage. And, more times than not, they go, no, that'd be fine. And then you can kind of walk through that. Now, I won't use a paper method like I normally do. I normally use the ODS. What I will do is I will take the concepts. And you guys, whatever, I don't know what method of evangelism you use, but you got to almost always start the same way. You start with authority. You start with, then you talk about covenant, what covenant we're under. And then you begin to deal with the plan of salvation, and you deal with Christian living and responsibility and the oneness of the church. And so you're going to try to condense that into 2 or 3 sessions as opposed to, depending on who you're studying with, an OBS, maybe 5 to 7 sessions.
If they're both Christians, right? So don't you, if one's a non-Christian, don't you have to prove that God exists sometimes? Or, I mean,
well, yeah, obviously.
You have to sort of say something, I mean, to
right.
have him respect the authority of the Bible.
No, that's true, and that certainly bespeaks, and a lot of that's changed over time.
Yeah, that's the first thing they say. Most people don't even believe
that's
more.
That's true. And here's the thing. Here's what you have to calculate into that. You're going to know by the time you get to this part of the counseling where they stand.
Yeah.
Not always, but in a great majority of the time, in my experience, if they're coming to you, to a preacher, to do a wedding, especially if they're coming to a preacher for the Lord's church, they especially been exposed to your preaching, then there's a good chance that you don't have to climb that hurdle. But you've got to be prepared to. But if you have to. Now, I've never had in my marital counseling where I was trying to do that. I've converted men who were, I never converted a woman that was an atheist, but I've converted men that were atheists that I later, not long after, in the space of time, married and had to do the Bible study because I'd already done it and converted them. But that's a good point.
I was just thinking maybe.
And now in Alabama and Virginia, it wasn't as often an issue. In Colorado, it's a bit more.
It's a bunch of hippies, as Brad would say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, a lot of New Age and Boulderites. So you have to deal with that. But now, I got ahead. I normally stick that right in the middle. Because money is something that everybody relates to. We're completely on the same page. And we talk about how can money be a problem in marriage. Here's some other things I would do in counseling. And of course, too much can be a problem. We wouldn't think about that, but especially for pursuing it. And all of our ambition is, is career orientation. If that's where our number one aim and desire is, it's going to hurt the marriage. Not having enough, different attitudes about money, spender, saver, the opposites attract, but it can be a repelling thing at some point. So I deal with that. And then next I deal with something that everybody can relate to, and that's in-laws. And we can have a little fun with that, break that, it's a little lighthearted, hopefully, unless it's you learn pretty quick if there's in-law issues. But what I would do, if there are, and that's the second problem area, I tell them very seriously to consider the impact that's going to have on the marriage. So second, and then third is religion. We'll get to that. So second is in-laws. And I always share something I heard back when I was a kid. You don't just marry the island girl, you marry the island. You ever heard that? That's it's so important. I remember a girl I dated in high school. I liked the island. I liked the island girl. Didn't like the island, and that became a major factor in the fact that our relationship didn't continue. I talk about how the scriptures teach about how to treat our parents. You know the relative passages, right? Ephesians 6, 1-4, and how that changes over time. When we're adults, we're not expected to follow the same rules as when we're kids, and that's so important. We're not ready to cleave if we're not ready to lead. And I talk about that. Where are you guys going to live when you get married? Not that it's a deal killer if they have to continue to live with their parents. Circumstances may make that necessary, and if all are agreed, especially the right kind of parents who can walk that line of allowing their children to be children. But it's tough if they're in your house, not to have them following your rules. So I emphasize what the Bible says. You need to leave. Are you able to leave? And cleave. That is, now you got to do number one. You're not calling mama, 10 times a day and being direct about what she says. If you're not ready to leave mama, you're not ready to get married. And I talk frankly about that. And occasionally it's the guy who can't leave mama. And I want the girl to see that. Who's going to be sitting on the nest in your, on the roof in your house? Is it you or your mother-in-law? You need to decide which one it is. And how do you know? Watch what's going on now. It doesn't magically change after you get married. Genesis 2, 18 to 24, that's where we talk about the leave and cleave. Matthew 15, 3 through 9, where Jesus talks about how the Pharisees abused the old law, distorted it.
3 through 9?
3 through 9. I always take a look at the book of Ruth.
Are the scriptures again?
Yes, Ephesians 6, 1 to 4. Genesis 2, 18 to 24. Matthew 15, 3 through 9, and then the book of Ruth. Now here, on in-laws, I deal with some general thoughts, and we discussed these. I've already talked about one of them. I am marrying the whole family. That's a concept that you've got to explore with them. Think about how you will visit both sets of parents. You know, and I realize this, especially the longer that I preach weddings and culture impacts people. And this may be your own experience. Wedding parties are typically now not just bridegroom and mama and daddy for either side. There can be four. I guess, if the mother and dad are divorced, you double it, And then you can have grandparents that are divorced. And so you can, those first two pews have gotten a lot fuller than they used to, and that's really sad. And it speaks, and you're asking them to be committed for life when they see those kinds of things all around them. But that's something that's very important is it affects holidays. I don't know how that works. I don't know if any of you know those or are from broken homes, how that works when you're married, if you have stepfathers and stepmothers and on both sides or on one side, where do you go for Thanksgiving? Do they all live in the same place? You got to determine that. You got to figure that out. And you might say in a situation like that, I just cut off all ties. It'll just be me and you against the world.
Yeah, sure.
And you may have an in-law situation where they're hard to get along with, and your spouse may say, oh, I can't stand the way they are, but be careful. I always counsel this. Don't speak ill of the in-laws. Because no matter how bad they behave, no matter what poor character they are, no matter how spiritually off they are, that's still mama, that's still dad. And the spouse may say those things. They say, oh, I can't believe, and then talk poorly of their parent. They have that prerogative. You be careful, because you weren't raised in the home. It's not your biological parent. That creates a lot of friction. And here's the spouse who's saying, well, you're saying the same thing. I don't understand it. And I can, you can see plain as day the misbehavior. But it's just, I don't know why. It's just been proven to be the case that it's a bad idea.
Of course it is.
Now, I don't think I say that from a vacuum. And I'm going to say this. I love my mother-in-law. But she's lived in our house for 3 years. So I don't think I'm completely out of touch with the reality of it. Yes, sir.
My only question about that is, it's you and your spouse, and if you need to communicate about things, that may be an issue you've got to communicate, so you may have to say something that won't be pleasant for them to hear.
That's true, and I understand that. But what I think that we've got to be very careful about advising is how you do that. You've got to be very careful, because you can be as frustrated or even more frustrated because spouse may have a little bit of a blind spot, and you may see it 20/20. But if you say it as you see it, a lot of times, now the truth needs to be communicated, but it needs to be done gently, and that's what I would counsel there. You don't excuse bad behavior, and that's a great point. But you're careful about how you communicate it.
I mean, sometimes you don't even get the whole story. You're only getting one side of the story.
That's true.
You don't know if your spouse is wrong. He could be wrong. I mean, he might be talking all this stuff, but he could be wrong.
Yeah, and it's so complicated. There's 1,001 scenarios. There's a general rule. The general rule is be careful how you speak of your in-laws. And I just think you just got to be very careful with that. Yes, sir. All right.
I see some persons, my dad told me once you could have either in-laws or outlaws.
That's right.
Outlaws have serious trouble.
That's right. That's true. Now, I do spend some time in talking about the fact that I counsel both the potential groom and bride that you need to make your own decisions. So I counsel them to be very careful about accepting financial help from parents once they get married. Because I don't care how much those parents, how good those parents are, how righteous, how godly. When you give, what are you? You're invested. And you got to protect your investments. And you're going to feel much more apt to be verbal and vocal about the decisions that are being made if you're pouring money into it. And so I suggest as much as possible be as independent as you can and take input. And it's a grace and it's a maturity to be able to receive input from others, including parents, but together as husband and wife make a decision. And so there's the balancing point we're talking about. Yes, sir.
No, I just say that it's only when I came here I realized that there's a custom in the States where the father pays for the wedding. So the father of his
Of the
daughter,
bride?
of the bride. I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
I love that custom. Yeah, 3 boys. It works.
I'm like, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, but you know, and sometimes it doesn't. That's not as hard and fast as it used to be.
You'll be in hot.
Especially with, yeah. Hey, we have to balance out the world, you know. But sometimes I've seen where the situation is either spiritually or financially, it's not good on the bride's side, and the groom steps up, his family, and pays. But that's still, I don't even know where that tradition came from. But beautiful. I love our country. Yes, sir.
And it seems like, too, that it leads over into the children when they grow up, not to speak bad or say anything about their parents. I've told my kids that if you speak of me as your old man, that is just completely it's disrespect. So it seems like that works that way, too. And it seems like there's a connection between all this and how David wouldn't kill Saul.
Yes.
Just that, like, there's always a certain amount of respect and honor to you.
Right. And that's, when you're talking about in-laws, that is a principle. You take Ephesians 6:1-4. You don't obey your parents once you're adults, but you do honor them. And so that's something that continues. You never find yourself in a position, and I'll tell you what, you live long enough that you have to even financially help your parents in a lot of situations. Yeah. And so what's the thread through that? It's respect. And what you encourage them to be is the kind of man and woman that through the years garners and earns that respect. So that when their children grow up, they have, because some have not lived worthy of respect. But I still tell that man and woman they need to respect them for the position they hold, if not for the person that they are. Yes, sir, Brett.
I put myself a note in here and it's worthy to share. As we're talking about this, speaking ill of the in-laws, that also includes what you say in front of your kids. Don't equate your mother-in-law to Gollum.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good. You could put that one, chisel that one in stone. You know, even when Gollum was replaced by something else. Yeah, that's
they will repeat it.
Yes, they will. Okay, lesson learned, right? Okay. Yeah, that's right. Let's say you and your spouse are talking about the issues or problems of one of your parents. And just a general rule, keep those kinds of matters away from the ears of the kids. It's really, that needs to become a common sense matter. So the balancing point is show respect, care, gratitude, and thankfulness for your parents, but remember you have a new number one. All right, you can expound on that as you need to, but that's what I deal with in-laws and the problem area of marriage. I mean, just from the volume of passion and comments that you guys have on this subject, you can imagine that's how that can be a problem area, how that's a very basic. And what a blessing it is to have in-laws that you can love and respect, but it doesn't always work that way. Number 3 is religion. And I deal with, in addition to conducting the Bible study here, if it's a non-Christian, And I don't have a breakdown. I do have files on the weddings I've conducted. I don't know what the percentage are. I would say the majority of those I married have both been Christians. So some of these things are related to just the place that religion needs to have in the marriage. Now, obviously, you need to cover this with Christians too, right? Just because somebody's been baptized into Christ doesn't mean their ticket's punched. And that not all Christians are the same in commitment and in the trueness of their religion. So I deal with the Bible on religion and marriage. And here's some passages that you can make reference to. Ezra 9, 1-3. Nehemiah 13, 23 through 27. And I begin with these, even if I'm dealing with a non-Christian, especially when I'm dealing with a non-Christian, because you know what those two passages are talking about, right? The mixed marriages of the people, and what Ezra and Nehemiah did in those cases. Now, I'm very careful with Nehemiah because, you know, he pulls out the hair and all that, you know. That won't be very prudent, but it shows God's disposition about those that are united in Christ. Somebody have a comment?
That's those mixed marriages, Christian and non-Christian?
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. 1 Kings 11, 1-8. Solomon and his poor choice. Yeah, 1 Kings 11.
There you go, Charles.
2 Corinthians 6, 14-18.
Just because it has kings in it.
Oh.
That's Solomon.
Wow.
Especially Solomon.
2 Corinthians 6.
2 Corinthians 6, 14-18. Now, guys, that passage is not talking about marriage. But there's some principles there about how difficult it is for light and darkness to coexist. For Christ and Belial. So I think we can understand context and still find some principles there. Because you put the light of a Christian with the darkness of a non-Christian. And I've seen it so many times.
How do you put that? Light and darkness in the same room. I mean,
That's right.
I understand it, but how do you word that in a way that doesn't offend the darkness?
Well, I let Scripture do the convicting. I let them. Those are maybe sometimes the passages. And what is this? How you do a Bible study? What does this passage mean to you? And how would this apply to your marriage? You just leave them. I try to let people discover things on their own, and a lot of times that's a much more powerful thing. Now they might go, well, "What are you saying?" That's kind of like, you know, you just drive back. Well, let's look at what Paul says.
You're the preacher.
Yeah, that's right. But you come to me as a preacher who reveres the Bible, and so we're going to let the Bible be the authority here. Ephesians 5, 22-33.
That reminds me of there in John, forget which chapter, that Judas left to go out into the night.
John 13.
John 13.
It was night. Well, I've preached that sermon before.
You know, and a spouse can get full of it, filled up and leave, and go out into the night, or make darkness permanent.
That's right. Yes, here's the position that we're in when we're doing premarital counseling. Remember, we want people to be happy. But if there's problems, we want to be used by God providentially to help them. If they're not meant to be together, if maybe it's a Christian who has a bright hope and they're getting ready to get married to darkness, if we can deliver them from darkness, then that's what we want to do.
What was that last passage,
Ephesians 5, 22-33. And then 1 Peter 3, 1-7. You know, the thing that's advantageous here, and again, this deals with the non-Christian side, there are a couple of times of life when married couples get serious, or people get serious about religion, who maybe have not before. And they may, during the college years, or if they go to work after they graduate from high school and leave home, they may drift away from the Lord. But you get married, you're saying, man, here's a brand new start. I don't get but one chance to do this. And so I want to make sure that the Lord has the right place in my life. And the next time they do that is when they have kids. And so you have them at a very integral time where you can help to influence them spiritually. And so I deal with that even beyond the Bible study angle. I deal with this with whoever I'm counseling. So there's some questions to ask here. Can we discuss any religious differences in a serious and rational manner? I don't care who you're dealing with. That's important. If you have two young people who've been raised in the church, maybe they're to two preacher's kids, or an elder's and a preacher's kid, or whatever it is, faithful members' kids, this is still going to come up. You think about it among yourselves. Do you guys have universal agreement on everything in Scripture? The faculty, do they? No. You can take any two people, do they? Now, why do you think that's going to be different? Because it's a man and woman who are in love with each other and attracted to each other and want to be married. And especially if they are spiritual people, they may have different views on matters. Now, we need to always emphasize that if it's something that's pertaining to life and godliness, 2 Peter 1:3, we've got to be united on those. There's a whole range of things that aren't heaven or hell matters that we may have a different view on. Will we worship regularly? We obviously know the answer to that, but we won't be thinking about it. We can talk about the importance of that and what it does for us individually and as a married couple. And what are we going to teach our children? In the one case in my preaching life where I married a husband that was not a Christian to a wife that was, a woman that was, I pulled her aside and I pulled him aside. And I said, where are your kids going to go to church? Because they were both devout. And I spent a lot more time with her saying, you are bringing into this world something eternal for which you will be accountable to God. Now, I was able to evaluate the situation. For a short period of time, they were unfortunately dividing the time. But over the last 2.5 years, they've been here the whole time. And that's still not perfect, but it's a lot better. But you need to warn them, it doesn't always work that way.
He became a member?
Not yet, but he's here all the time. The whole 50-50 thing that they tried for a little bit, she finally said, I can't do that. And the elders approached her and said, you can't do that. And so as a result, I don't know what's happened. I just know he's here. I mean, not just, she's always here, but he's here with her. So I'm very hopeful.
Well, what do you mean by 50-50 thing?
Well, they were always here on Sunday morning, but they would go to his religion on one service a week as well.
Oh. And they went to place membership? And they went to place membership, and the elders...
No. This is a situation where she was already a member. And the elders went to her and said, you can't do that.
Oh.
No more 50-50.
Oh.
Which helped her out a lot, because to her credit, of all people I've ever seen to do something like this, she was a stronger, more righteous person. It was very surprising that she would even make that concession. And in the intervening time, then that was a very short-lived thing. They're here all the time.
But see, that the Christian can fall for stuff like that.
Yeah, and the Christian can fall away. It doesn't always work like this. A lot of prayer, a lot of counsel that I got before I made the decision to marry them, but here was the bottom line for me, was they're going to get married somewhere. And they have come to me, and I don't want to slam that door if they're going to do that anyway. Now, if you say, no, I'm not going to do it, I understand that. And I'm not stating to you that what I did is what I suggested that you should do. I think that's a situation where you, as a preacher, have to make a decision about that. And I'll tell you, if you're worth your salt, it's not one you're going to make this out of hand. You'll wrestle. It'll wear on you. It did me anyway. All right, number 4, communication. Talk about what the Bible says about communication. Passages to deal with are Ephesians 4, 25 to 32. Colossians 3, 18 to 21. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. There's some redundancy there. Ephesians 5, 22 through 33.
What was that last one?
Ephesians 5, 22 to 33, same as in number 3. But really, I camp out a lot on that Ephesians 4 passage, 25 and 32. You know, wherefore laying aside falsehoods, speak every man truth with his neighbor. And then it ends with, put away bitterness and wrath. And I will drill down on all those. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. Even as God, for Christ's sake, is forgiving you. Talk about what we can just conquer that grace. And in the middle of that, you know, don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. Don't give place to anger. Don't give place to the devil. So there's a lot of rich material there. All right, here's some questions about communication. Can we talk frankly about all areas of marriage? Here's what you find. If you delve widely enough, there are personalities. There are people who grew up in homes where they just don't talk. I don't know if you have ever seen a home situation like that. You might have even come from that, where communication is discouraged. Where and you just don't feel like you can talk about anything. You know, you may, and a lot of times for boys, what happens is they have questions about sex as they're getting to that age of awareness, and they don't feel like they can talk to their father. And that's really not something you want to take to your mother. But better that than nothing. And so if they just don't feel like they can communicate, what can that do? That can give them thoughts or warped, views about sexuality. You know, could it help to make them inclined toward things like pornography? So you see, with a girl, it may just be an environment where it's just not open. So you want them to consider making their home a place where they can talk. Some of that's going to be hard because they have to overcome in their own background.
Well, you made the point the other day, the other week, that when you get married, the tendency from then on is to drift apart.
That's right.
So it's natural that communication is going to drift.
That's right. Yeah, even if you do, when you think about there's the different levels of communication when you're getting to know one another. I talk about that in this particular stage. But and that's what makes an affair such an attractive thing sometimes if we are drifting in our own relationship, because you're in those early stages of communication where it's exciting. You think about the person that you marry, there's that finding out their likes and their dislikes and finding out the way they think and their hopes, their dreams, and you go through all of that, and it's exciting, and it's glue. And then you get to the point where you know all those kinds of things, and then it's just dealing with communicating the mundane things of everyday life. If you're not continuing to touch base heart to heart, then what happens is you drift, and then here comes somebody else, and you go through those early stages, and you don't understand that there's no commitment here. There's no fidelity. It's just excitement. And then you can't look ahead to see what happens after that. But it's all because we're not communicating. I mean, that can often be the case. Well, that's exactly right.
Well, you see, Neal, marriage and communication is like batting practice.
Oh, I like that.
You got to keep practicing.
That's right. You got to be able to take one on the chin, too, every once in a while. I think it goes astray. That's a good point. I like that. Let's see. That was so good I lost my place. Can we discuss personal problems openly with each other? Struggles. All the grace of free communication. Why don't we do that? Afraid of punishment? Afraid of rejection? See, deal with those kinds of things. A fear of losing love. Am I interested in talking with my mate about their work and hobbies, their interests? I'll deal with here what I think I've talked to you guys about. How my wife will sit and watch Georgia Bulldog games, and she'll go to baseball games with me because she loves me, not because she's an avid fan. I know there are women out there who are naturally that way. And I watch the cooking channel because I love her. And I like it now more than I used to. Number 4, under that, do we have similar interests? And can we enjoy doing things together? Man, they need to be able to look at that honestly. Because if they have nothing in common outside of each other, trouble. And you've seen that before. Some folks can make it work, and sometimes I've been made to wonder, how in the world are they doing it? But a lot of times it's just as it might look. They have nothing in common. They are more apt to drift apart. Here's a big one. Can I accept constructive criticism from my mate? Then I deal with the difference between constructive and destructive. I do spend a lot of time on this, guys. I do talk about communication because it's a big issue. I can't believe I didn't put this in slides for you. I'm very sorry about that. Let me just deal with levels of communication. What I'm going to deal with, 3 more things here under communication. Levels of communication, conflict styles, and blocks to listening.
Blocks to listening?
And I'm just going to mention those. I'm going to give you a resource. This is probably some of the more fruitful part of counseling. Your potential husband and wife are going to really relate and see how this impacts even their dating relationship. Levels of communication, non-personal. That's weather, current events, sports, politics, gardening, cooking. Second level is information. It's things that you don't know about each other. Like I cheated on my science test in 5th grade. You know, something that's peculiar to you. I told the kids about that, and I'm teaching the teen boys right now on Sunday morning, and we're talking about honesty.
What's the first one?
Oh, I'm sorry, non-personal. Non-personal. Small talk, if you will. Yeah. Second is information, things that you don't know about each other. History, likes, dislikes, hopes, dreams, all those kind of things we talked about a while ago. And then feelings. How do you really feel? The ultimate level of communication. It includes some prickly stuff, insecurities, flaws. Yes, sir.
One of the things that couples argue and have problems over is when they start to deal with the information part. Especially if that person is to date a certain person that person knew. There was one details about that relationship.
Oh, yeah.
But giving them details, you know that they cannot handle what is that you're going to say.
Yeah, you know, there's a fine line between dishonesty and prudence there, and that's now I'll tell you this. I would be very frank with them that probably something that you don't withhold. Now, I don't know, guys. This is a tough one. Let's say that you have especially in the world we live in, if one of them is not, or both of them are not virgins in that relationship, that belies a whole lot of issues. And you're talking about what causes information that one cannot handle. That can be a very difficult thing. But on the other hand, you know, you don't want to imply or suggest that you are pure, sexually pure in that way when you're not. So that's a tough. Well, that's, you know, these aren't just minor things that you have to deal with. And there's a lot of complications. And even if sex is not involved in something like that, if there are feelings and attachments, if there was a long relationship, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a confess all. You know, and I'll tell you, I've been married to my wife for 21 years, and it's amazing how little we talk about former boyfriends and girlfriends. And when we do, I guess we're to the point now where we can joke about it. You know, like we were teaching the other day, Kathy talked about she went and, I forgot what she went to eat or drink after she had just gone to the dentist. I forget what it was. It was something you shouldn't eat or drink. And I knew that a boyfriend of hers, dad, was a dentist. And I said, oh, did you go to this guy's dentist? She goes, oh, no, I never would go to him. And then the boys came in the room, and she goes, what? That was your boyfriend? Who's your boyfriend? And she goes, no, and then she turned around and said, Kathy, we just taught honesty. She goes, yeah. But 22-year-old Neal might not have been laughing when he was having that discussion. It was too soon since I'd actually met that guy. So. All right, so that's a good point. Good point.
You don't want to tell them everything about your past
No.
anyway, because I'm sure not going to go into any of that.
No, there are things
If it's
that...
relevant, really relevant.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and the kids are a whole different story than the potential mate. All right, conflict styles. Let's deal with that just a little bit. I give them all 6 of these, and I ask which one is the most biblical.
That's my friend.
This is under conflict styles. We have
I got
levels of
7.
communication,
Okay.
conflict styles, and blocks to listening are the 3 major areas we're going to deal with. So levels of communication, that's non-personal information and feelings. Is everybody clear on that in the notes? All right, now we're dealing with conflict styles. There's 6 of these. The first is always yield. That's the yes dear syndrome.
Yeah.
Number 2, withdrawal. That's the turtle syndrome. Just draw back in. Not going to communicate. Not going to talk about it. I'm going to clam up. And I'll talk about these. Just make sure they understand what these conflict styles are. They'll either know somebody or they've seen it or they understand it, or maybe it's them. They'll identify. Have to win, number 3. No matter what. No matter if I'm dead to right, wrong, I have to win. It's always a battle. It's always a game.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, but it's pretty common. Yes, and sometimes it accompanies borderline personalities or flaws of character like narcissism, where I have to be right, and you can't be right, and I have to be one up, you have to be one down. But people, I mean, we're the product of our upbringing, and not all upbringing is healthy and conducive to producing somebody who is going to be a good match in a marriage situation. But if you can be aware of it, maybe you can put it aside. Number 4, deal with your problems and solve them. I don't know why I do this, but I put that as number 4 out of 6. That's the right one. Usually what we do is we deal with, there's 5 wrong ones, and then we deal with the right one last. But I put that one in the middle. It doesn't matter. You want to put it last, I'm sure it's fine. That's the right way to deal with conflict. It is the only right way. Now, the last 2 may have some things to commend them, but they're not always the right. Number 5 is compromise. Now, I talk about the fact that you have to compromise in communication, in conflict. Nobody gets their way all the time. And if they do, it's an unhealthy relationship. There's either going to be rebellion or you're going to break the spirit of the other person. But what if it involves a biblical matter? What about that couple I mentioned a while ago? She compromised, but her compromise wasn't right. So it's not always the right way to deal with conflict. And then the 6th one is something we're seeing a whole lot more in our postmodern emergent culture, and that's accommodate to the situation. Accommodate to the situation. Relativism. It depends. Situation ethics. Whatever the situation calls for, if our motive is good and right and loving, then we'll choose that route. Doesn't matter if it flies in the face of Scripture. All right, so what I would do with those is I would deal with how to identify it and what, if it's not a healthy style, well, why not, and to make sure that everybody understands. Some of these are very clear on paper, but they're hard to work out in a relationship. Like with drawing. I mean, you take, the first three. It's easy to see that that's wrong, but it happens so much. I can't tell you how much marriage counseling I've done where one of those first three styles were being modeled by one of those of the partners. Okay, before I leave communication, let me give you some blocks to listening. Write down this resource. Do you guys have McKay and Davis? Or do we have it in the library? I have no idea whether you'll look it up and try to find it, but it's worth your while. These are corporate guys. They're not members of the church. But I've never seen a work that compares to this on blocks to listening. Here they are. I'll just give them to you. Comparing. Who's smarter? Who's more competent? Who's more emotionally healthy? You can't listen because you're too busy measuring. So that's it. Comparing. Number 2, mind reading. What are they really thinking? What do they really feel? And you can have some fun with this. You say, well, who's more likely to have that kind of an issue, a woman or a man? Could be. Mind readers are reliant upon intuition, hunches, misgivings. A lot of times it didn't have anything to do with what's being said. Third is rehearsing. We've talked a little bit about some of this, right? It seems familiar to me, but I talked a lot, so I don't know where I've said what. But rehearsing is where you're hearing the person and you're thinking ahead. If they say this, I'm going to say this. And then some people go so far as, I'm going to say this, they'll say that, then I'll say this, then they'll probably say that, and then I'll say this. How can you listen when that's how you're formulating? That's the guy that has to win, by the way. Number 4, filtering. And that's obvious, right? You listen to some things and not others. Why would you filter as a listener? What are you filtering out? What are you filtering for?
Filtering the stuff you don't want to hear.
Oh, well, yeah, the stuff that bores me I'm not going to listen to, but what are you filtering for to allow in? What are you trying to get in filtering? Are they angry? Are they unhappy? Am I in trouble? Am I in danger? If it's none of these, then you just let your mind wander. I taught a marriage class years ago, and we dealt with some of this. And we did an exercise where you write down which 2 or 3 you felt like you were guilty of. And it was amazing. There are a lot of folks that were guilty of filtering. I wouldn't have thought so. But you never know.
Is intervening or interrupting or finishing sentences, is that filtering?
That could be filtering. It could be rehearsing.
When someone won't listen, they'll tend to cut you off, interrupt, or finish your sentence.
I've got that in a couple of places here. One area we're going to deal with one called sparring, and that probably fits more there than anywhere. But it can happen with rehearsing. They're going to say this, I'm going to say that. So sometimes it goes from the mind to the mouth, and you're not able to listen. But I suppose filtering could be a place where that shows up. But more typical than not is you're listening for something that says that you're in danger, that they're unhappy, they're angry. And if you're not hearing that, if it's, oh, here's how my day went, then you just tune them out. So that's more what happens with that block to listening. Number 5, judging. It's just prejudging the other person. Even if you know them well, you can prejudge. And what I emphasize is that judgment comes after you hear and evaluate, not before. Number 6, these preachers can relate to this, dreaming. When you're listening, you're dreaming. You have listened. And with dreaming, what happens is you have to listen, and something that's said triggers an association in your mind. And they're talking about, and see, all of these are things that we can be prone to. And somebody might say something about, I don't know, all roads lead to baseball for me, so what I just did was think of that. But, you know, maybe something like, hey, look, somebody just painted that bench. You know, or maybe this bench is something my grandmother gave me. Bench, Johnny Bench, boy, he's one of the best catchers of all time. Man, yeah, I remember, Ray Foster, I remember when Pete Rose broke his leg in the All-Star, you know, and I'm not listening anymore, and that's an important bench to my loved one there. All right, number next, identifying. That's where you take everything a person tells you and you refer it back to your own experience.
This is number
Say
7.
that again, please.
Yeah, identifying.
Give an example of that.
Somebody's telling you about their, maybe a woman's pregnant, and she's telling you about her complications. Instead of listening to her and hearing what her issue is, you go, oh man, I remember my wife, you know, when she was pregnant with Dale, man, she was in labor 52 hours. It was terrible. You go off for 5 minutes talking about that.
Yeah.
And here they are trying to tell you about what their problem is. So that's
Right.
identifying. So you take what you hear and you relate it back to yourself. It's selfishness.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. It's very common. We're not good listeners.
Yeah. No, not even in the church. When my wife went to Japan with our daughter and son-in-law to teach English over there and work with the Mito Church of Christ for a year, when she arrived over there and she got in the Mito Church, one of the first things she was hit with was, oh, you're American. Americans don't listen.
Yeah.
That's the first thing she got hit with. And they were very upfront and out about it. And then proceeded to tell her, yeah, Americans cut people off, that you cut each other off, you don't let each other finish your sentences. Then she found that out at
What are you
school.
talking about? We don't do that.
Yeah, what are you talking about, Chris?
Well, that's right. We can talk about why that is. I think it's
Somebody telling you.
how complicated life is.
Yeah.
Well, we have all the gadgets, and our attention span is short.
It is.
A lot of cultures is much more based on formality
Yes.
and social graces and introduction and so forth. Number next, I have mine with letters. I don't know if it's H in mine. Advising. You're the great problem solver. You want to help and suggest. But you don't hear feelings or key disclosures. You don't acknowledge the pain. You fail to just be there. Because you want to be, dear Abby or whoever it is anymore. Next is sparring. You debate and argue. And others don't feel heard because you're quick to disagree. That's what sparring is. I'm just giving you a short description of that. Again, guys, you can probably now get it at AD Books or one of the booksellers, even Amazon, pretty cheap now because it's a couple of years old. Actually, probably 10, 15 years old. Being right. That's pretty obvious. You go to any length, including twisting facts, shouting, accusations, calling up past sins, to avoid being wrong. So it's unfair fighting.
I was fair in number 1.
Yeah. Obviously, that was said by somebody who wasn't married, I guess. Number next is derailing. Derailing. That's a sudden change of subject. You're bored, you're uncomfortable with the subject, so you joke it off or you get them off of that subject. I'm telling you guys, every one of these can play a prominent role in marriage and communication, including the last one, which you would think is a pretty good communication tool, and that's called placating. You want to be nice. You want to be pleasant. You want to be supportive. You want people to like you, so you agree with everything.
Placating?
Placating. When you placate or try to smooth things over.
Oh. Is that like flattering?
It's more like peacemaking. at all costs. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm going to validate you, affirm you. And again, that could have a very good motivation, trying to be a good Christian and consider the other one above yourself. But when you're in a marriage relationship, nobody's always right. And so you need to stand up at times in situations. All right, the last one is sex, children. Some of the scriptures I would deal with, Genesis 2:18-25. Matthew 5:27-30. Hebrews 13:4. 1 Corinthians 7:1-7.
Which makes it 7?
You know what Paul's talking about there? That's defrauding, withholding from each other in a marriage relationship.
Give it up.
Yeah. In short, I'll tell you, I dealt with a marriage situation with a couple where, let's see, how long were we married? 4 years, and only twice did she allow him his marital rights. And the thing is that they struggle with purity issues when they were dating. That didn't actually cross that line, but they flirted with it. And so you can imagine the frustration, the hurt, the anger. So there's a lot of ways in which sex can create problems in the marriage. And again, you're not a sex therapist, so you're not going to be graphic. Something I've always found, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm preaching, or I'm in a counseling situation, is you never try to create in the mind what you're trying to convey. So you don't have to be a graphic novel there in front of them, but you do deal with that. Here's what I deal with in the matter of sex and children. I talk about the reasons for sex in marriage. You want them to have a healthy understanding of what sex or what role it plays in marriage. So you know some of these. Bring children into a family. Companionship, and by that we're talking about closeness and the warmth that comes with sexuality. To relieve tension, emotionally, physically. Acceptance is another. Is it not cooperating today?
Yeah, it's like,
I'm sorry.
might throw it out the window.
You ever seen that commercial? They don't air it anymore, where the guy goes up and he hugs his computer and it looks like and then he takes it and he throws it out the window. I've had more than one, including this one that's making me feel that way.
Sometimes it's really your fault.
Yeah,
Clumsy.
yeah. I've dropped this one more times than I
Can
would.
you go over that quick? Just
Sure. Bring children into family. Companionship. Relieve tension. Acceptance. Those are the four we've mentioned so far. Number 5 is to prevent immorality. And then 6, to satisfy God-given needs. All right, now deal with, to some degree, ways that you increase sexual intimacy in a marriage. It's amazing how good attention and how close to notes, particularly the guy is taking when you're talking about this part of the counseling process.
Did you say these were questions?
These are ways of increasing intimacy. All this is under sex and children. You see, here's hopefully what you're going to have when you're done. You're going to have a template for doing premarital counseling. You have no question as to how you want to proceed, what you want to deal with. You have no shortage of information. I've actually given you some more material from John Moore that's helpful as well. Here's some ways. Improve the quality of the marriage as a whole. That's a duh. What's the book? Sex Begins in the Kitchen.
Repeat that again, then.
Improve the quality of the marriage as a whole. Next, cultivate the art of love making. Now that we're talking about emphasis on love.
Not just a physical act.
That's right. Doing the little things. Being patient.
It's amazing how it will cause you to look at her different. Just see her in a different light.
That's right. With more honor and respect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next, and this is very important, especially for younger people, free yourself from unrealistic sexual expectations.
No, that can create a problem when one has past
That's right.
experience.
That's right. Yeah, and that may be something that has to be dealt with in the counseling situation. But it's not just past experience. It may be because there's the fear of comparison and all those kinds of things. But that's one of the many ills of pornography, because it creates an image or a thought or an expectation in marriage or in sex that can't be duplicated in reality.
Yeah, some of those things you can't respect your wife. You can't do those things.
Well, first of all, there's if you are practicing that. But if that is where you've gotten your information about sex,
If you never even tried them, you don't even know if you like that stuff. I mean, come on. That's just.
Exactly. Well, and it can come from the other extreme. If a girl has a mother or grandmother or somebody of influence or a sister who talks negatively about sexuality, she might have an expectation it's going to be something to be afraid of, something that's going to be painful, something that's to be dreaded, something to be endured. And none of that's what God wants for marriage and sexuality. So it's not just over expectation, it's wrong expectations or negative expectations. Number 4, understand the difference, the similarity of male and female sexual responses. Guys, again, I think you need to go into just extreme detail, but at least they need to be aware of that.
Just basics.
Mm-hmm. But that, I think some of that's just very obvious. You know, males are visually stimulated. Women are words of affirmation and acts and other. It's a multi-layered situation. Men are much simpler. Yeah.
Turned on in a second.
Yeah, that's,
Ladies like an onion.
so, you know, but that's especially if they've been good and have kept themselves pure, they have no clue as to what's on the other side of that door, and that can be a cause of frustration. So it's not that if they love each other and they love the Lord, they'll get through that part. But they need to be, if they're aware of it, then they're not completely caught off guard and think, oh no, what's wrong with us or whatever. Let's see. Free yourself from culturally imposed sexual mores for marriage. A more is a value and a perception of how things are supposed to be. So don't let the culture tell you what sex is supposed to be like.
Repeat.
But that's probably how I would say it better. Free yourself from what culture says sex is supposed to be like.
Culturally imposed values and stuff.
Mm-hmm. There's some crazy stuff out there. All right, so then we'll just deal with some typical barriers to marital intimacy. Because I firmly believe that God gave us sexuality as a means not only to perpetuate the human race, but to provide glue, to keep us close and strong. So we want to make sure that we offset these barriers. Fear of being hurt. I mean more emotionally. Low self-esteem. Guilt. Now slow me down if I'm going too fast, or is this about the right pace? All right. Okay. Chronic busyness. Manipulation. Something that Nariah's mentioned. Ghosts from previous relationships. Projection of your feelings onto your mate. And you could add to this list, guys. I've got a lot more, but that's. You just want to indicate that we have to watch for things that stand between us and having the kind of relationship God wants to have physically.
So all this is one session?
Yeah, because again, you're not going to paint them a full picture. You're just drawing the outline, So
Yeah, well, I understand that, but I can see so many questions coming out of just any one of these subpoints of the main point.
yeah, I would think communication is going to be a harder one because you're going to be very discreet and wise as a counselor, and you're not going to fill in a lot of the details.
Well, I'm not just talking about the sex point. I'm talking
The
about
5 problem areas is going to take probably 3 sessions to complete.
Okay.
Yeah, no, don't. Because something we'll talk about here in just a minute is some of the rules of counseling in general. And one of the rules is don't go an hour tops unless it's an extraordinary circumstance. And it has to be very extraordinary, in my opinion, like if it's a crisis or an emergency.
Right.
So you're cutting it off. There's no way. You might even find it takes 5 sessions to do the problem areas. And then all I would say about that before I leave is children should be planned, wanted, and loved by both parents. Because it is sex in children.
Children should be.
Children should be planned, wanted, and loved by both parents. There's 2 little things I mentioned there under that. And that is you need to consider spending time together before having children, if that's relevant. I know sometimes it doesn't work that way, but
I think it merits.
yeah, it has been that way. Although you want to give them food for thought about whether you want to do that. Not that the man doesn't, and not that marriage is not ultimately what happens, or that the man doesn't financially support it, but to be careful not to let that be the reason why, if you can help it. And that can be a sticky situation. I remember it's funny. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Along this point, my mother gave me some real good advice about this point right here. And her point was because one day the kids are going to be gone. And if you don't know each other, you're going to be left with a big empty house with 2 people that are strangers.
That's exactly right. And I'll give you some wedding templates, some wedding sermons, and I often mention that this person you're marrying needs to be your number one, because you think about it, it's not just kids. Parents who are probably going to die before you, Friends will come and go. Church family will come and go. Co-workers come and go. But the one that comes and stays is your mate. And so you got to continue to invest in the relationship, because empty nest is hard. It's one of the hardest things. Now, I haven't dealt with it yet, but I have a whole lot of friends that have and have seen a lot that do. It's tough, but it can be navigated. It can be done. But if you're not building that relationship all along the way, you're in trouble. It's a good point. All right?
No stretching.
All right. Another thing that I deal with now that I didn't is because ethics have brought this to the surface, but I still just try to give them counsel to look for the facts themselves. In the broad sense, now hear me well, birth control is a biblical concept, I believe. When we're talking about birth control, we're talking about, and somebody will say, well, and I believe that control can be had on the front end and the back end. If you can do one, you can do the other. If you can wait, then you can make an arbitrary decision on the other end. I don't believe it fools the providence of God at all. I'm not going to strongly push that, because people have strong feelings about that, and they have a right to make those decisions as a married couple. But if sex is for more than procreation, what we don't want to ever be involved with is anything that destroys life. What I have found is necessary to do anymore is to say, if birth control pills are what you're considering as a method, you need to be informed. One of your fellow students told me that he did the legwork. He can't find a birth control pill on the market that doesn't have an infanticide feature to it. The thinning of the uterine walls. And so if you have a conception that takes place, and you have an attachment to the uterine wall, and there's a feature of that pill that thins that wall, and then that conceived life is able to break away, then it's post-conception. So, but that's one method. There's a great many others out there. There's rhythm. There's cycles. There's all kinds of things, and there's other products. So again, I'm not going to sit there and be, Dr. Ruth, I'd say, I don't even know if y'all even know who that is, but I'm not there for that purpose, but I am going to say that's important, is you want to avoid any kind of method that terminates life. Mifepristone is, RU46, is what's called the morning after pill, and that's been, I remember when they went through the process of finally getting that legalized, but the same chemical is present in some birth control pills, or a like product that does the same thing. So obviously, we're not, as long as we're preventing life, then that's different than if we're destroying life. So, it's an age in which those things are necessary to be said. So, but that's about it. That's all I have dealt with typically in that. Do you guys have any questions about the problem areas of marriage? Okay, here's just some practical tips for the premarital counseling session. Number one, begin and end on time. And I stay there no more than an hour, usually. Number two is take notes on each session. Now, I don't do that usually in the middle. Now, if it's the first meeting and we're getting to know each other, and I'll say, hey, do you mind if I take notes here? I want to keep this in my records. And they'll be, oh, that's fine. Are your parents still married? How many siblings? Tell me about how you became a Christian. So if they're not a Christian, I'll be able to get that information as well.
You look over that before you start another session next week.
That's why I take notes. Typically what I'm going to do is after each session, I'm going to write down observations, significant things. So it's going to be, I like to rely on my memory. The only thing is I just don't want to be impersonal. And you guys may think, well, I'll just take notes while they're in there. And that may work for you. I've just always felt like that it just, I'm not Sigmund Freud. I still want to be sitting there doing that while they're there. I listen. There can be some things, if it's obvious and it sticks out, he's being overbearing. She is very withdrawn. She's not nearly as interested as he is, or vice versa. I'm going to write that down, and I keep a file. nobody ever sees. Elders don't see it. It's just for my information so that I can help. It guides me where I'm going to go in the sessions.
Neal,
Yeah, but
you as the preacher, are you just at the mercy of anyone that wants premarital counseling? Is there ever a time that you don't do it, that you say no, that you resist it? Or, in 1 month, you could have 5 couples that come to you for premarital counseling. Well, does that mean that you've got 5 now premarital counseling sessions?
well, I think some of the same rules apply as anything else. Is you don't take on more than you can handle in your local work, and you're not a counselor, so I don't know. I preach for a congregation of 300 and 325, and maybe we have a little more gray hairs than others, but that's getting to be a difficult trend. That's why evangelism is so important. But I've never been inundated. I've never been in a situation where I was just overwhelmed.
Oh, really?
I have done premarital counseling for couples I didn't marry. I have married couples that I have gotten concrete information that they got premarital counseling from somewhere else. And then, of course, I've done both. Because of my disposition, especially if I'm marrying them, I'm never going to refuse premarital counseling.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to always, because, again, I'm accountable to God for bringing these two together. I want to make sure that I've informed them. And I want to make sure their eyes are open. And I need to know where they are, even. If they have a flippant attitude about marriage, I wouldn't knowingly join two people together like that. Number 3, give homework after each session. And hey, this is up to you, but I make it a condition of the next session. It shows their readiness to commit. Now, if they say, if there's an extenuating circumstance and it's obvious and they're trustworthy and they've done homework for 3 or 4 sessions and this is just something that happened or one of them did and one of them didn't, you might just consider that and go ahead and do the counseling. Because it's inconvenient for you, too, to have to reschedule.
What do you assign?
I assign readings. If you have I don't know how you guys, what kind of resources, I have to use some of the counseling material, but marriage books. You might say, maybe take Larson's book and say, I want you to take notes. And you can't, it's going to be hard to get them to do the whole book. Maybe there's something you think is particularly valuable. Maybe it's the overview. And then say, I want you to read that and take notes on it.
Some of them.
Note cards, bring it back. I take the Ephesians 5 passage, and I say, I want you to, do the other person's, what the passage says about their role. What is your attitude toward, what are 5 expectations you have for marriage? A lot of, and you can just create your own assignments. There's something that helps to reinforce what you're doing in the sessions.
So those things that Bill Stewart showed us from Garrett's Smiling,
Yes.
those videos were pretty good. Could that be homework? To watch
Can be.
these together?
Anytime someone leaves your office, that goes back to the preacher in his library.
Well, I'm not telling. You might have a years.
Yeah,
I don't know.
or if your church library has a
Or
copy.
just take something out of there, maybe for homework with that.
Yeah.
Because some of that stuff is really.
Any number of resources, Making Things Right When Things Go Wrong by Paul Faulkner is good. Any number of books. Number 4, begin with the questionnaire. You guys have that in hand. I see an extra here. That must be just my original. That's to find and evaluate problems. And then you see on the board there, typically 6 to 8 sessions is what you should plan for. May not take that long. I've rarely been on the high end of that. I don't think I've ever done more than 8 sessions. And the difference is going to be maybe the Bible study. Okay, let me say a little bit about marital counseling. Just some words to the wise there. And I deal the bulk of the time with premarital and marital counseling. Because a lot of what I'm going to say about, or at least some of what I'm going to say about marital counseling would apply to individual problems too. And I've given you some other information that are helpful in counseling, including an agreement that you sign and you have the person sign that relieves you of liability. That says, hey, I know the Bible, and that's what I'm doing is counseling in that area. don't have technical expertise. The first one should make a lot of sense, but it's sometimes very difficult to get both spouses to sit down on a marital issue. Try to avoid counseling with just one of the spouses. Especially be careful if you're counseling only the woman. We've already talked about having the right setting for that, right? Windows, doors, windows open, other people present. Doors open if you can. I really would avoid trying to do counseling in a room with a closed door that you can't see through. Man, that to me is just a scary situation. I mean, even if you have no inclination, there's no, how do you prove that with a closed door? But also be aware of what's going on inside of you. Make sure you're guarding your heart. But there's another practical reason why you want to avoid only counseling one spouse, right? It's what somebody said a while ago. At best, you have half the story. Man, and in marriage, there's never just one story. It's always there's two sides. Number 2, make the counseling Bible-centered. Now, in setting this up, there are a great many methods out there. I mean, there's methods that lead people to make their own conclusions. That's somewhat of a Rogerian theory. It's what my dad does, where you guide, you ask questions, and you're trying to get them. And you know, as you do, probably that's how you conduct Bible studies. We're trying to do the same thing in counseling. You're not trying to tell them what to think, feel, or even to solely tell them how to solve the problem. You're trying to get them to ask the questions. Because what are you doing? You're not giving them the fish, you're teaching them to fish. There are methods that help people take responsibility for their actions, give people a balanced view of themselves and others. So there's all kind of methods, but the foundation of all of it has to be the Bible. And so the counselee must be willing to listen to and follow biblical advice. Hold them accountable to that. If whatever the issue is, if it's dishonesty, and you're seeing patterns of the dishonesty continuing, hold their feet to the fire on that. Say, well, what does the Bible say about this? What are the consequences that Scripture say come out of this? Because, guys, the Bible has all the answers on things that matter. We can have utmost confidence in them.
Have you ever had a couple come to you for premarital counseling that they didn't think they were going to be looking at the Bible?
No. And now, right now we're talking about marital counseling. And it's even more the case. But the same is true, Charles, of premarital counseling. I haven't. And again, it falls back to the reason, to the thought that at least one, if not both, are coming. Even in Colorado, even in the hippie culture, they're coming to me because they want something different than they can get from a secular source. Because there's secular counselors out there. There's completely non-religious institutions that they could draw on, but they're coming to me. And that's something, again, I'm not cruel, but it's something I use to my advantage. Now, you're coming to me, which tells me, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. That tells me you want to do what God says, and that you respect His Word. Even if I'm not convinced fully that they are, that's something we're going to strive together to get to. And they may more feel that way when they're done than they did when they started. That's the goal. If there is some concern about whether they are interested in what the Bible says or not. Understand there's no shortcut to experience. Don't feel bad, guys. You'll look back on some of your counseling, premarital and otherwise, and be a little embarrassed. But that's just the growing curve.
Like
We all have to begin somewhere.
It's like with some of your sermons, right?
Oh man, yeah. There's some that there aren't very many sermons I preached in 92, 93, 94 that I'll pull out and even try to adapt. If there's ever I run out of firewood, I know where I'm going to go for those to heat my house. Number 4, the first meeting is very crucial. It really sets the tone. So, what do you do in that first meeting? Before you even begin, before you even get to the listening part, you need to project something, and I don't mean in an obnoxious way. But you need to make sure that that you come across confident, encouraging, and reassuring. I mean, you need to tell them, I'm so glad you've come. You've done the right thing. Doesn't mean that you guys are flawed or failed people. You know, it's kind of like when somebody responds to the invitation as a Christian. Are they weak? Or is that a sign of strength? Is that a sign of a tender heart? I mean, we shouldn't look at that as somebody who's less or flawed in some way because they come for help. Those are the people that really have a better chance a lot of times than those that just sit there and bottle it up and try to deal with it alone.
They see the need, right?
That's right. So you can reassure them that, hey, I certainly don't think worse of you. I admire you for your courage, for your willingness to seek help when you need it. And then you discuss your role. That's that John Moore information. I would go over that with them. Once I found that speaks very well. Something I want to know up front. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can't do. All right, so you're in that first meeting. You've projected that confidence. You've reassured them. You've given them the disclosure of what you can do, what you can't do. What do you do then? In that first meeting, you listen to their concerns. You've got to find out, usually, what they come to you for is not really what the problem is. It's a symptom a lot of times. But as you're listening, then keep in mind that they think this is probably a one-time visit. We're going to go to the preacher, and he's going to patch everything up, and 10 years of problems are going to be solved immediately. You need to emphasize that you can't fix their marriage in 1 or 2 or 3 sessions, but you still give them hope. We can get this solved. Most problems in marriage are imminently solvable. They're not terribly complex. There are things that can complicate them, but most situations can be worked through. All right, so as you listen, but you don't let them dominate the session. Boy, I can get away from you very quickly. And you become a rant fest, and you have a full-blown fight right in front of you. You still have to maintain control. But you've got to listen enough to hear what's going on. Don't give advice before you hear the problem. So in listening, you guys know this, right? You summarize the problems. So if I'm hearing you right, Sally, what you're saying is A, B, and C. Yes, that's right. John, what I'm hearing you say is that this is it's D, E, and F. Yeah, that's right. And Sally, did you hear what John said? Yes. Mm-hmm. And John, here's Sally's concern. What do you think about that? So you're listening. You're summarizing what the issue is as they brought it to you. Number next is validate their concerns and sympathize with their plight. That's just a technique on your end. You don't go, oh, that's silly. I can't believe you guys can't get that solved. Oh, there's some, huh? Validate their concerns and sympathize with their plight. Okay, as you see it there, you don't know what their view of God in the Bible is. If they won't let the Word of God govern them, you have to tell them, I'm not sure I can help you. If His Word is not the authority for your life, you see, if it is, then you have hope. If they really mean it. And then offer them the opportunity to rebuild or strengthen their marriage, one session at a time. So what you're doing is you're emphasizing this is a process. Can't solve it. See, what you're trying to do is you're trying to, and guys, I got to say that counseling is one of my least favorite things to do, but we're helpers. We're in ministry. We're servants. And so we've got to remind them that this is not going to get solved immediately. We're starting a process. Then provide the rationale for needing several sessions. You guys, I gave you a copy of the Johari window. Look through your counseling papers. Well, I've already mentioned the Johari window to you. The things known to you, not known to others, things known to you, known to others. Things. It should be a box. Well, I should admit to you, I didn't. It's on the. No, I didn't keep one for myself.
It's here.
That's it.
Where at?
The Johari window. It's on the back of the.
It's on the back of this one.
Page 1 of the stapled sheet. So what you're dealing with, does everybody have that? Okay, that's where it's okay. And that's what you're dealing with in counseling. Because there are vital issues usually that are not known to self and or not known to others. So we've got to invest the time and the effort to get there. All right. The principles in marital counseling, especially like the Johari window, those kinds of things, are the things that will help you when you're dealing with people's individual issues. We used to have, I think, in the school, an entire class on counseling. I don't think we do at present. And I know I can't give you everything you need on that, but that's a pretty significant component of what your local work can be about, or it can be something that you'll do many times, so I wanted to deal with it. This is a good place for us to stop. We're going to start with balance after chapel, so let's go ahead and get an extra minute because we worked you hard today, and we'll resume at 10:45. And
Which is an easy way to get a good grade, so we want final. It's a good way to.
Finals on
Thursday. Thursday at 8.
This has probably been
This Thursday?
but it's gone by really fast.
Well, I'm sorry, from my end, it's definitely been by very fast. Don't have some of the stress you guys do.
But somehow you guys haven't had the minute. I feel like I have had many hours less this quarter than I have in the past. I don't know what happened. Is it
What
the
was
less
shorter?
week or something?
Yeah.
Well, no wonder. This is what we got left. And this is me giving you balance. Normally I teach balance. And there's no way I'm going to get through all of this. I have no idea what's going to happen there. It's just, well, I lost an hour that first week. And then, but Mike gave that back to me because he only took 2 hours in the class last year. So anyway, be that as it may, balance is your last section of unit of section 2. So that closes. You'll notice on the PowerPoint that we are now beginning section 3. And here are balance. That's balance that goes with that. So the handouts on balance that I gave you at 8 o'clock this morning go with balance. You are not responsible for the handouts, but you are responsible for those notes I just gave you. So you will have information on the final drawn from that. But you won't have to type it down. We don't have the time to deal with it in class.
So there will be stuff from this.
From the little paper clips that you just picked up, yes.
So if I staple it, then it won't be, because it won't have a paper clip. I like that. Okay, John.
You do what you want, Brad. Reconcile or
That
console
was a
yourself.
kind way of saying you're stupid.
I'd never say that.
I know. Not direct.
Now, here's what we've kind of tried to cover between now and final. We've got the preacher-elder relationship, weddings and funerals. Now, a lot of that material is going to help you there. I'm just going to deal with some practicals, things that you deal with those events. I'm going to talk about interviews, beginning of work, ending of work, and then realistically, that's about all we're going to have time for. But I really feel like this is an important introduction to that material. When you talk about your work as a preacher, as we said at the very beginning, it's hard to deal with that apart from the people situations. And I'm just kind of taking notes on some people situations through the years, and you'll be able to tell similar stories. Some will be completely different. But I remember talking with a woman who had 2 small kids who was going to commit suicide at a very rundown hotel where I was. It was late at night. A wayward member and a drug addict standing in my yard at 10 at night with his eyes, pupils dilated, and being intimidating. A man confessing that he had committed vehicular homicide 30 years before in my back seat as I'm driving. Talking to a deacon who was leaving his wife for another man. Going to ICU to see a man who attempted to kill himself by putting a shotgun in his mouth. He didn't succeed. Rescuing an elderly lady who ran out of gas on the interstate at 3 a.m., being called by the state trooper. And they say, Mr. Pollard, I'm the state trooper. That's not the way you want any conversation at 3 in the morning. Intervening by phone in a domestic squabble at 2 a.m., and I could give you some other times from some different situations. Threatened by a team with a switchblade to a foyer. Getting a call from a sister high on crack at midnight. And going and helping her as she was coming down. Walking in to see a man bloated with pancreatic cancer who seemed to double in size almost overnight. Having a 22-year-old young man that you baptize not only leave the Lord, but move in with his girlfriend and then kill her in a jealous rage. So those are the kinds of things that happen with people. But there's also teaching and baptizing a woman 2 weeks before she died. Seeing an elderly man with an oxygen tank nearly running down the aisle to get baptized before you can even finish your sermon. Watching young people that get baptized become gospel preachers and missionaries. Being grabbed by the arms of little orphans in Ukraine who won't let go of your hand and who are hungry for God's love. Watching godless, foul-mouthed, atheistic, arrogant people become devout, righteous, active Christians. Regarding nearly a 95-year-old man as one of your best friends because of his faith and love for the Lord. Getting a letter of encouragement and thanks from a former critic and thorn in your side. Being exposed to some of the best people on earth. I mean, negative, positive, good or bad, so much of what we do, and hopefully why we do it, has to do with people. It's hard to think of your life as a minister without thinking of it in terms of people. As you'll look back over a typical schedule of a week, there'll be conversations with widows, counseling, meetings of all kinds that have to do with local work, hospital visits, visiting visitors to the assembly, teaching class, preaching sermons, funeral home visitations, funerals, Bible studies, follow-up studies, and time at home with your family. Every bit of that is related to people. And so, everything that we do somehow ultimately relates back to people. Because studying for every class and every sermon is futile without people. Evangelism has no meaning without the people element. Why do you organize your life and your office and all of that, except as it helps you in your work with people? So what I want to do is to cut a tiny slice out of inspiration. And I want us to see the master preacher. You know, you've heard the old saying that God had one son. He was a preacher. He said he came not to heal but to preach. He did some healing while he was here, but he said he came to preach. And I want us to see how his life related to people. Now, if you have your Bible or you want to toggle with, between your notes and logos or whatever, we're looking at Luke 17 to Luke chapter 19. And I want us to see some things about the master preacher and people and some lessons that we can learn from it. And that will introduce this section, I think, very appropriately. All right, the first thing that we want to notice is that it's all about sick people. With regard to our Lord, and I just somewhat randomly select this text. Oh, that's that timer thing again. Before I do anything else, I need to figure out what causes that.
Oh, there's stuff.
Huh?
stuff that we're going to need.
Yeah.
We have PowerPoint?
Oh, you mean all this time you haven't had anything?
No, it just came on.
Oh.
It just went off.
Just for this one. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is the first thing I had for you, so you didn't lose anything. That's good news. All right. So, as I started to say, I just need to look back there and check. I somewhat randomly selected this, but it was chock full of the very point that we need to make as preachers. And it proves that it's all about people. The first people that our Lord encounters in this section of Scripture is sick people. We need to remember that it's all about sick people. And you remember this is the account of the 10 lepers that are healed by Christ. And you remember the details. Christ enters into a village. There's 10 lepers who plead with him to heal them. He does that. And you remember only one comes back to thank him. There's several observations I want to make from that particular account. The first thing is that the sick will often be isolated. As you think about it, the law of Moses mandated that the leper had to be isolated from the rest of society. In verse 12, that's where we find them. But today we'll often find that there are sick people who are isolated from others. And what effect does that have on them? You know, depression, discouragement, the feelings of isolation. Especially if you're chronically ill and you don't see people very often. If you know, I've known folks through the years that have had long-standing illnesses, MS, muscular dystrophy, things that are gradually taking them. But in the meantime, you know, for one reason or the other, they're all alone. There are those who you go to hospital visits where you have to take precautions to keep from either contaminating them or being contaminated. I don't know if I told you guys about when Mark and I went and visited a lady a few years ago. We went over to University Hospital in the east end of town, and we thought it was an evangelistic opportunity, so we went over there. And University, if you've ever seen it, several floors, so we shoot up to the 12th floor, and we go in there. Still kind of new facility, so we don't know the layout of it very well. The door's open, so we go right in there, and the lady's laying on the bed. She's from one of the neighboring states, Wyoming, Oklahoma, or somewhere. And we go straight down and we sit in the little, you know how they have those little credenza couches that make out of the beds? So we're sitting right there. And probably 10 seconds later, a nurse comes running, sprinting into the room. And she says, "You guys need to get gowns on and masks." Well, it turned out the lady was in there for, what's that skin-eating condition? MRSA? So here we are, just all leaning back on that couch, and the nurse said that's where she spent all of her time since she's been here. And so we're coming home, we're Googling it, you know, what's the side effect. Fortunately, the Lord watches over, you know, children and less than wise people, and so we had gotten there at the end of her contamination period, and we were fine. But it had eaten a hole. She proceeded to tell us in that visit that it had eaten a hole in her stomach and all kind of scary stuff. But that's once in the whole preaching life that I'll remember it as long as I live. But usually that's not the case. Usually they're all alone because the condition itself isolates them. And those who are ill, especially chronically ill, are very lonely. So sick people are isolated. Number two, we can glean from this particular account that the sick need to be paid attention regardless of how they respond. Jesus knew perfectly what was going to happen, right? He knew that 9 were going to come back, and yet he still healed all 10 of them. Why? Well, in part, because of who he was. And so we need to realize that we're not doing this for gratitude and thanks. A lot of times folks will be so grateful that it's humbling to you. But even if they don't acknowledge what you've done, the time you've spent, the ministry that you've done, the encouragement that you've given, you do it anyway. Number 3, and we do that, by the way, because of who we are, not because of who they are. But then also in this account, we see that there will always be those who are grateful for our efforts. Only 10% in Jesus' case. I think the statistics are a lot higher for us. And you'll find, of course, that visiting the sick is a surprisingly rewarding business. And people never forget who came to see them when they were hurting. Well, that's such an important principle in ministry, is be there for people. They'll remember it. Not for any advantage that it gives you, but for the fulfillment of purpose that occurs. Now, the next thing you'll notice in the text is that not only was it all about sick people, it was all about young people. In Luke chapter 18, verse 15 through 17, you'll recall what happens there. By the way, if you're thinking, well, we've got a big gap here, we do. I'm going to come back to that gap. Luke chapter 17, verse 20 through chapter 18 and verse 14 is a very lengthy teaching section. And so Jesus does a lot of teaching in that section. This is the next interaction that he has. Jesus was very interested. There's some things we can learn from this. Remember, they bring their children to Jesus, and the disciples will send them away, and Jesus says, don't forbid them. Here's what we learn from that, from Jesus. Jesus was very interested in young people, and so should we be. For one thing, they model so many needed dispositions, don't they? They're tender-hearted, they're quick to forgive, they're trusting, they're optimistic. I have to tell you, we got some sweet children around here, a lot of them, and you guys have sweet children. Brett brought Ashlyn in to say hi to me. She's kind of shy, but we talked. She saw my little African animals and all that I have in my office. But she left, and then she came back. She handed me a piece of gum. And Brett said, wow, that was we gave her that for Valentine's Day. That's her last piece. Most people aren't, they might give you a piece of gum if they have plenty, but even my wonderful, wonderful wife, she won't give me the last piece. There's 2 pieces, I get one. But that's how children can be. And the world is not jaded them yet. Jesus invested in children. And Jesus' example reminds us not to forget the young. They touch the tomorrows after we're gone. You want to reach the church beyond your lifetime? Right. Speak on TV and other forms that are recorded. But the way you can make the most profound influence is by being involved in the lives of children who are going to be adults and living after you're gone. Number 3, it's about unreceptive people. That's what we learned from Luke 18 through 25. Now, this is the hard one for me. I mean, if you know somebody's unreceptive, are you going to spend any time with them? Don't you think, man, it's the pearls before the swine, and I got to use my time more wisely? Well, I'm not saying that we can know that. Sometimes we're wrong. But Jesus knew how the rich young ruler was going to respond, right? He had a perfect forethought. I mean, the rich young ruler had free will, but here's Jesus who's spending time with somebody who's not going to be receptive. You and I don't know. We can't tell by looking at the appearance. And just as we just learned in that chapel lesson that Brother Light gave. We're not. We're to cultivate the soil. That's our job.
I think I related to my family. They're unreceptive. That doesn't make me one bit less hard-headed to go after them anyway.
Yeah, you're motivated and determined because you know what's at stake, even if they don't. That's exactly right. But how do you know if somebody's receptive or not? You have to be among them, right? You have to spend some time with them. And Jesus shows us that. So a rich young ruler comes up to Jesus. He's a young man who has it all together, financially and even seemingly spiritually. Further examination shows he didn't have the commitment that he needed to have. But you think about it. The rich young ruler shows up at Bear Valley on Sunday morning. Is he the kind of guy we want to turn away?
No.
We're thinking, hey, this is the kind of guy we want in our congregation. He's morally clean. Man, look at his life. And he's got money. Wow, But he turned out to be unreceptive, you see. We learn a lot of things from that. Number 1, the unreceptive may seem like good soil. All these things have I kept from my youth up. Verse 18 through 21. And in soul-winning efforts, hot prospects can become cold contacts after the process goes on. But to balance that out, sometimes hopeless causes become heavenly conversions. So we continue to work. Another thing we learn from Jesus' encounter with this unreceptive person is that the unreceptive are hindered by greater loyalty to something else. Verse 22. People are going to disappoint you by their misplaced motives. People aren't going to be willing to put the kingdom first, and you'll encounter those. But then also we learn from this rich young ruler that the unreceptive are wrestling with a formidable foe. Verse 23 to 27. What was the rich young ruler's battle with? Materialism. Well, and how well that relates to our culture. The Eastern cultures deal with mysticism and animism and spiritualism, but we deal with materialism, almost the opposite end of the spectrum. That's why the East and West minds so often don't comprehend one another, because they see the world so differently. And of course, we understand this, right? You guys have already had the book of Luke, haven't you? Mm-hmm. We are the rich of the book of Luke. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we, in comparison to everyone else, are the wealthy. Look at the farmer in chapter 12. That's us. Look at the rich man in chapter 16. That's us. But what we need to remember is that while it is a difficult, a formidable foe, it's not an impossible foe. What does Jesus say in this very context? In Luke 18 and verse 27, the things that are what? Impossible with man are possible with God. Now, at some point, we'll have to give up on unreceptive people. That's a very heartbreaking and difficult thing. I remember a study that we were in, a couple of studies. They both happened to be with individuals who were of Hispanic background, but more than that, Roman Catholic backgrounds. And spending literally months in both studies, at some point it came about that we saw we're not going to get any further. And you hate it, because in that period of time, you get to know people, you get to care about them, and you're pulling for them to come out of darkness into His light. And when it's apparent that they don't want to do that, that's tough. It's a hard place to be. But sometimes the unreceptive can change. Don't give up too soon. So we see that from Jesus' third encounter right here in Luke chapter 18. But then next, interestingly, as a contrast, it's also about struggling people.
About?
Struggling people. And that's up on the PowerPoint there.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right. Y'all are usually very good to let me know when it's not there. Who's the struggling person in Luke 18, 35 to 43?
Blind dude at Jericho.
All right, blind Bartimaeus. Christ is going to Jericho. And in fact, guys, this is one of the most pitiful characters in all of Scripture. Jesus goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. He goes from the rich young ruler, the guy who seems to have it all together, but ultimately doesn't, to this blind man who is dependent upon everybody else for every one of his needs, laying there begging by the side of the road, from one to the other. And who is receptive? Who follows? The one with need. But he's struggling. And in fact, if you look at it, he's struggling in at least three ways. You think about it. How's he struggling?
One he can't see.
All right, so he's struggling physically. And because of that, especially in his day and age.
Beggar.
So he's struggling financially. How else is he struggling, as it turns out? Spiritually. All right, so he's struggling financially, physically, and spiritually. I mean, there's the epitome of a struggling person. But, and underline this, Jesus takes time to interact with him. Poor old widowed lady responds to the invitation. What do people do? If not careful, she's neglected and ignored. A deacon or an elder or a preacher comes forward. The church just flocks around them. Why is that? Because sometimes we look at people based on who we think they are instead of what they need. And here's Jesus seeing this man who had nothing to give him, nothing to gain from him, but he stops and he helps a man who's nothing but needy. We've got to do the same in our ministry. There's several things that we can learn from this encounter. The first thing's from verse 36. People search when they're needy. Verse 36, what does he do? He inquires into the commotion about Jesus. He's got all these needs and he's struggling, searching. Please help me. When are people more likely to want to study with you?
When they're in trouble, when something's really bad going on in their life.
All right, as it was said this morning, when the bottom's falling out, right? Struggling with potential divorce, or if their child is very sick, or if they can't have children, or any number of things. When they are face to face with their need, they're open and they're receptive. Somebody said sometimes people have to be knocked on their back before they can look up and see God. I think that's right.
You don't know that you're on the bottom until you look up.
That's it. That's right. So when things are going along smoothly, it's kind of you go door knocking, and we've done that in wealthy neighborhoods because we don't need to be prejudiced, right? The rich need to hear, same as everybody else. Because usually, in the last 15, 20 years, we've figured it out. We go, okay, we're going to go to the poor neighborhoods because they're more receptive. And we go, well, we're not going to waste our time over here. But when you do that, a lot of times you're going to go through a lot of doors where you knock and you say, hey, you need Jesus. And they go, need? What do I need? Look at all I have. So that's certainly true. When people are needy, they're searching. Also, those who struggle are in need of mercy. Verse 39. They need compassion. We live in a world that increasingly is not willing to give it when people are hurting. They step on you when you're down. And it's the consequences of Darwinian thinking, isn't it? It's the survival of the fittest. Not for God's people. We help those who are hurting. And then also we learn from this encounter that those who struggle need what only Christ can give. Verse 40 and following. And so we're trying to reach out to people who are in that condition, who are needy. Now that brings with it problems. There's going to be, as we often say, there's going to be baggage, there's going to be high maintenance. There's souls that Christ died for. And they're fertile souls. All right, number 5, it's all about lost people. Who do we encounter in Luke 19, 1 through 10? Hint, he was a wee little man.
Zacchaeus.
Okay. So he sees Zacchaeus in Luke 19. So Jesus is on his way to Jericho and he meets the blind man. Now he's in Jericho and he meets Zacchaeus, who we'd have to agree is a very, very lost man. But be aware that the Savior was interested in this short, shady shilling stealer in the sycamore tree.
You say that.
That's not for you folks necessarily. But he was short, he was shady, he was a shilling stealer, he wasn't a sycamore. And the Savior was interested. There's several things that we see in this encounter that are very, very important. Number 1, lost people are often people of unsavory lifestyle. They are lost, right? Verse 1 and 2. And you can think about that, and I think about circumstances. One time my wife was studying, she and one of our deacons' wives was studying with a lady who we ultimately baptized. But she, as it often is, and there's issues and problems and dysfunction, she had a nephew that was staying with her. And he had just gotten out of prison. And he was huge. And they didn't know he was there. They've been studying with her for several weeks. And she had, these apartments had upstairs. And so they're studying in the living room. And he comes down literally with a bottle of whiskey in his hand. And he's crying. This big, huge bulk of a man. And he comes down and he says, I've been listening to you guys as you're studying down here. And he said, I need the Lord in my life. Well, and you'll appreciate this, given the very violent nature of why he was in prison. I was concerned for my wife's safety. I didn't know that was what was going on. But we went ahead and we studied with him separately and let them continue their study. He came one evening to church services, and he had a Catholic background. He came up and he knelt at the front. And I don't know enough about Catholicism to know how standard that is or if that's an unusual thing. But come up to the front and kneel because he's wanting to respond to the invitation. Well, we had 5 elders, and one of them, Ronald Herman, saw him respond, and he went up And I'll never forget what he did. He went up and he put his arm around me. He just let him, he was crying, he let him cry. And when he was done, he began to talk with him. And he said, come up here, let's talk for a while. And he handled that response, and he got up and he said, this young man is really tortured by his past, and he wants to study some more and try to get there. He wasn't ready to obey the gospel, didn't know enough at that point. But what did that elder teach that congregation? That somebody who acts in a way that's abnormal, who's got some very rough, big, terrible baggage, that you shun them and you kick them out, or do you show them compassion? Now, I have to say, sadly, we didn't ultimately baptize this young man, but we were able to get him into a study. Lost people are often people of unsavory lifestyle. We think, oh yeah, everything's going to be clean and rosy, and we won't have any issues to have to deal with as a church. No, it doesn't work that way. It didn't work that way in Jesus' day. And we have got to have our arms open to everybody who's willing to come to Him. Also, the lost people often can't see Christ for the crowd. Literally, in Zacchaeus' case, certainly isn't that the case today. Verse 3, we see him unable to see. That's why he climbs up in the tree. So how are they going to see Christ in the crowd? You've got to help them. But then third, lost people may be people that others can see no potential in. Verse 7. What was he?
He was a tax collector.
What kind of tax collector? He's a chief
one. He was a boss.
He was a thief. Yeah, he was in a place of prominence apparently because he had been able to extort quite a bit of money. And I don't know how it was, but how it is a lot of times now is people have to live that down for a long time. And it shouldn't be that way. But lost people are often people that nobody else can see a potential in. It's funny how this can happen. We had in Virginia a man by the name, well, I won't say his name, but he was a murderer. And he had done his time. It was a second-degree murder charge. He got out of prison. It was in another state. He said, I'm coming. This is what I've done. So the elders were aware of that. And he was still worshiping in Virginia when I left. And to this day, as far as I know, the elders know. But that's not something that, as far as I know, has been publicly shared. Because he repented and he was reformed. It was a crime of passion that dealt with a family member. What do you see? Do you see what he was, or do you see what he is? So we've got to have that ability. Now, also, lost people are often people who are willing to repent. Verse 8. He says, I'll make restitution. I'll make up for what I've done wrong. I want to do what's right. And you listen to what our Lord says in verse 9 and 10. He says, today salvation has come to this house because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. And apart from Zacchaeus being a Jew, everything else about that pertains to our circumstances today. All right. Number next. It's all about the Lord's disciples. Now, you'll notice there I have I don't have it there, but that's chapters 17 through 19. Because in the middle of all of these encounters that Jesus is having with the sick people, and the young people, and the unreceptive people, and the needy or struggling people, and the lost people, all along the way, Jesus is taking them aside, and he's encouraging, he's talking to, he's teaching his disciples. So the emphasis is that Christ pays great attention to the disciples through all these things. Hey, Scott, were you raising your hand?
No.
Okay. Try to get your fingers.
Trying not to
feeling
smack my computer.
Okay. Now, what does he teach them? I have that kind of sketched out there for you on the PowerPoint. But he teaches them about the future. You can just look in the text there. You'll see this. Chapter 17, verse 22 through 38. By use of a parable, he teaches them to pray and to not lose heart. Chapter 18, verse 1 through 8. He He teaches them about spiritual improvement. In Luke 18, 9 through 14, two men went to the temple to pray. The one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. He teaches impartiality and tenderness. What an object lesson in the way that he deals with those young people. And he's teaching them the whole time that that's going on. He's talking to them. The kingdom of heaven is such as these little ones. He teaches them spiritual perspective, chapter 18, verse 26 through 30. He communicates and builds relationships, even in difficult circumstances. His upcoming death, they don't want to hear about. Chapter 18, verse 31 through 33. And then he urges faithfulness in chapter 19, verse 12 to 27. So what do we get from all that?
Took time to teach them.
To teach them,
For what he had to do with everybody else, he made time for his own.
okay? And for us, who is our own?
Family.
Well, certainly in the most intimate
Congregation.
sense, that's true. But we're talking about our brethren. We're talking about the church. We need to be, what you'll have in those notes when we get to talk about balance. We're balancing our time between those that are potential members of the body of Christ, those who may never be, those who are in the community, those that we encounter. But our Lord never lost his focus on those who are already his followers. Now, we don't have followers. Now, that's not what the correlation is. But we do have brethren. We do interact with the Lord's people. We need to make sure that we spend the time with them that we need to. Here's why. Number one, they need our encouragement and our comfort. Just like these disciples did. They needed the comfort and encouragement that Jesus gave as he spoke of what was about to happen to him. And as he demonstrates or stands up to enemies and as he finds himself in various situations. Do not neglect in your preaching to preach sermons of comfort, sermons of encouragement. As you think about what your brothers and sisters are dealing with, they're dealing with the stress of the job, trying to be a Christian in a world that doesn't encourage that. They're struggling to keep their commitment to their marriage when a lot of folks around them aren't. They're going to get to the point where they go, is it worth it to be faithful? I think we need to move from a position of empathy in our preaching and teaching, in our working with brethren, assuming the best in them. Because there are those who could be doing better that aren't doing better. There are people who are not as committed as they ought to be. But I believe the rank and file are struggling and in need of us to encourage them and to comfort them and to help them. There's the old mantra that my dad always said, I know other preachers did, that our job as preachers is, you know that, right? To comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I think that's a good way to look at that, right? There's a lot of folks who are comfortable who shouldn't be. We need to stir that up. There are a lot of folks who are afflicted that need comforting. But number two, they also need us to lovingly challenge them and admonish them. Jesus is not just stroking them. He's calling them out. And there's a place for that. They also need us to be there in their difficult, trying moments.
Neal?
Maybe, yes, sir.
And you just start from, give me the first one from the first one.
About being with our brethren, they need our encouragement and comfort.
Okay.
They need to be challenged and admonished is number two. They need us, number three, to be there in their difficult times. And then number four, they need us to spur them on to heaven. At times, brethren will frustrate you, disappoint you. Even at times, rare occasions work against you. still have a healthy attitude toward the church. Because I believe some of your greatest blessings in preaching will be because of them and through them. Your brethren aren't perfect, but neither are you. So we need to find ways to praise them and uplift them. I love what Paul says to the brethren at Thessalonica. This is 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 8 to 11. And if we can incorporate what he says into our thinking as a preacher, it will be so effective. He says, "But since we are of the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, as a helmet, the hope of salvation. For God has not destined us for wrath, but for obtaining salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we awake or sleep, we will live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another, just as you are doing." So we need to remember, some people will treat us better than we deserve. Others worse. So we have to make the decision now to love them, to serve them, to believe in them, and to encourage them. Every moment that you spend with brethren, no matter what, will be beneficial time. Because you can learn even from the negative experiences that you might have. You know, there's companies, there are websites, a lot of them that say that we're in the people business, but never is that more true than us. We truly are. Now, as I blaze through there, any questions or comments or thoughts? Okay, we've got a little bit of a bonus. That's the good news of time. For me, it's good news. For you, maybe not so much. The bad news is I don't have that in my PowerPoint, so I will speak slower. I want to go ahead and introduce elders-preachers relationship. And I want to do that through Acts chapter 20. So if you want to turn in your Bible to Acts chapter 20.
Did you say elder-preacher relationship?
Mm-hmm. This is the next. So we've already dealt with the first unit in Unit 3, or Section 3. And that's just kind of an introduction to preacher and people. Now we're dealing with elders and preachers. We're going to look at a subset of the people that we are involved with in our lives. I believe that this is the lengthiest discussion between a preacher and eldership that we have in Scripture, if I'm right. I don't know. If it's not Acts 20, I don't know what it would be. It doesn't involve a local preacher and his elders in a located place. It involves Paul and the elders from Ephesus. So it's not an exact parallel, but it is worth our notice. You'll remember by way of background that Paul sends for these elders to meet him in Miletus, according to Acts 20 and verse 17. And he looks back over a relationship that he says lasted how long? Do you see it in the text there? 3 years. That's verse 31. All right, now, and here as you look through the text, what were the characteristics of that relationship? If we were to try to describe the relationship that Paul had with those elders, what words would we use? Now, you might come up with some different ones, but here are some of the words that seems to me describe that. The first is the word relationship. Verse 18. What does he say in verse 18?
Right?
Uh-huh.
And when you have come to him, he said to them, "You yourselves know from the first day I set foot in Asia, how I was with you the whole time."
All right, I was with you the whole time. All right, so it was characterized by relationship. Number 2, it's characterized by humility. Verse 19. What does he say continuing there in verse 19?
"Oh, I did not shrink from declaring to you anything that was that's 20, so serving the Lord with all humility and with tears and with trials which came upon me through the plots of Jews."
All right, I don't think there's anything wrong. Paul has an inspired assessment of himself when he says that I serve with you with humility. Is that important in the preacher's elders relationship? That the preacher isn't too big for his britches. I mean, had formal training. You know, how much training have elders had? Formal training for the job. So often, hardly any are done except for life's experience, which is very valuable. But as far as organized leadership training, a lot of times not at all. And so here's Paul, who sat at the feet of Gamaliel, who was a very well-versed man, a very well-rounded man, very cultured, very refined, very knowledgeable man. He was unexcelled as a Pharisee of the Pharisees, Philippians 3, but he was humble. We should never be educated beyond our intelligence, so we're in trouble. Number 3, it was characterized by emotion. Guys, I'm not saying we have to be crybabies, but we should care about what we do. And for Paul, that meant tears. Verse 19 and 31. I mean, this is rich. What here, the Holy Spirit has given you a template for how you ought to relate to elders. Number 4, it was characterized by his assisting them in their private and public work. Verse 20. I wish we had time to just look in the text, but you can find that there. Just look in the text. Number next, it was characterized by their having done church work together. Verse 25. Those are the most impactful memories I have with elders, is of our rolling our sleeves up together, whether it's visits, Bible studies, dealing with difficult people and situations, doing the work together. Number next, it was characterized by his willingness to challenge and admonish even them. Verse 27 through 31. I'll say this here. I want you to know that I know that I often need to be told what I can do better, and I have been, and I appreciate being told that, especially by elders. But we had an issue at one time where, and every congregation seems to deal with it, some more than others, where you have people who are doing administrative stuff during Bible class. And I remember in an elders preachers meeting saying, we need to encourage our members to do a better job of going to Bible class. I said, that may mean that some of you guys need to set a better example. That's not an easy thing to say. And I would say that you say it because you love them. If you don't care about them, just let it slide. See, this is not just a job. We're in the service of our King of Kings. And so because of that, we're going to do even the difficult. And you can't have a good relationship with anybody if you hold back what's needed, right? If it's all just roses and sunshine and you're great and you're wonderful and you never do anything wrong, that's not healthy. So it's not the other end either, where you can't do anything right and you're always, you're a problem, you're trouble. But here we see Paul willing to challenge them and admonish even them. And then finally, and this is so powerful, I do want you to read, Scott, read for us verse 32 through 35.
And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have coveted no one's gold, silver or gold or clothes. You yourselves know that these hands ministered my own needs to the men who were with me. In everything I showed you that by working hard in this manner you must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive.
All right, and to make the point I want to make, it also takes in verses 36 through 38.
When he had said these things, he knelt down and prayed with all of them. And they began to weep aloud and embraced Paul and repeatedly kissed him.
Keep going.
Grieving especially over the word which he had spoken, that they would not see his face again, and they were accompanying him to the ship.
All right, this relationship was characterized by mutual affection and respect. I mean, you want proof of the relationship? What was it like? Notice how when they parted. Paul says, I've admonished you. I have told you that this is, I've not shunned to declare unto you the whole counsel of God. And those elders resented that, didn't they? Here's Paul, who's up there just telling them everything that God says, the positive, the negative, the reproof, the rebuke, the exhortation, with all patience and instruction. And how did they respond to that? They knew he cared. Now, I think we can do some of those. I think we can reprove and rebuke and not develop a relationship if they don't know that we care about them. But it's obvious that the humility, the tears, the care, the concern, all wrapped together with the negative stuff too, cause them, I mean, can you imagine ending a relationship with a congregation where when you leave them for the last time, they begin to weep aloud and to embrace you, and this is weird in our culture, repeatedly kiss you, saying, man, this has been such a fulfilling spiritual time for the 3 years that we hate to see you go this much. I don't know, as the son of a preacher and seeing other preachers all my life, I've seen some situations where they almost ran him out of town. And it's sad, because I think this is what it's supposed to be like. And I think it can be. And let me say this, and it's probably, certainly, a lot more to do with them. When I left Virginia, there were tears on both sides. And I hope if the day ever comes to leave here that we can have that kind of a party. Because that's the way it should be. Elders should be your friends. They should be those that you develop great admiration and respect for, even though you know they're not perfect. Let me say a little bit more by way of introduction, and then we'll go ahead and close the class for today. Elderships in the past few generations have had to put up with more than a few preachers who were unindustrious, i.e., they were lazy, unmotivated, unapproachable, and unlikable. Maybe those guys weren't properly trained, or maybe they failed to listen to what they had been told. Sometimes preachers let disappointment and bitterness take over and offset their effectiveness. They can become apathetic, bitter, or abrasive. But preachers have also been saddled with elderships that were unqualified. The day may come when you serve where there's an elder that's not qualified to serve. And we'll talk about how you deal with that, because the way you don't deal with it is to say, week one, you're not qualified, and you're going to, you need to step down, you need to resign. I always say that because guys have done that. And they have gotten all kinds of trouble in congregations, or caused a lot of trouble because of that. Unsound elderships. Uninterested. They have kind of a CEO mentality of the eldership. As long as we make sure that the contributions are being, put in the bank, and we're building that account, then we're good. And not really interested in dealing with people issues. I'm not saying it's frequent, but it happens. Unsure. That is, they're not sure what Scripture says or what to do with it. And uninvolved. They may treat the present preacher based on bad experiences with former preachers. I think we mentioned that, right? Sometimes you may be asked to give an accounting for your day, not because of you, but because of the guy that preceded you. Some may tend toward the worldly side, being material and earthly, but inept in the shepherding aspect of the job. I don't know how to quantify this, how often it happens. But despite those possibilities, it is not only possible, it's probable that you can have a wonderful, and fulfilling relationship with your elders. And that's what you're going for. That's what you're aiming at. I love what Cleon Lyles said. He said, elders are human beings who laugh when happy, cry when sad. While God wrote the rule for their office appointments, He did not create them with built-in superhuman qualities. These men are the appointed shepherds of the Lord's flock, but they may have the self-same conquest of self-mastery, as we all strive to conquer. We need love, sympathy, and human compassion in combination with grateful appreciation for our elders to be competently able to enter into a relationship of mutual feelings with these men. Now, when we come together on Thursday, we're going to begin with some key ingredients that will help in the elder-preacher relationship. So we'll start there. We'll finish with elders and preachers, then we'll get into some of the other matters. And hopefully by then, Brad and Orion will have everything all patched up, and we'll be good.
Yeah, if he could just stay awake.
Okay.
You're on tape for that too.
Yeah, that's right. That's now immortalized on video. Any questions about assignments or anything?
Scripture, no?
We have never heard.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you do. Last one, Luke 24. Yeah, I'd hate to bring the test and you not be ready. It's either Thursday or Tuesday. You can be done with it on Thursday. Luke 24, 46 to 41. Luke 24, 46 to 41. All right. Scott wants to lead us in the closing prayer.
Father, we thank you for this day. Such a wonderful day, Father, that we get to dig and learn more what it takes to be a servant of you. We thank you for Neal and his family, Father. We thank you for the things that he's teaching us. We thank you for this school and their great compassion and their great desire to teach the truth and teach others to pass the truth on. Help us, Father, and strengthen us to do your will above all things, to always recognize what you want in our lives and how we can pass that on to others. Help us to have a great desire to do your will and to teach others to do the same. Help us to glorify and honor you in each and everything we do. In Jesus' name.